Greetings and welcome back. This is part 5 of the beginning of my autobiography. It's the learning years, and during the early days of my match fishing career, which was split between Roath Park Lake and the River Taff, it was Roath Park Lake that really was the most challenging because it was full of roach, and there were certain methods that you had to, or techniques you had to overcome to obviously get a good weight, because most matches you needed double figures of roach. There was the odd occasional carp in them days, and also the odd eel, but that's about it. But the roach was the predominant species. In fact, we called Roach Park Lake Roach Park Lake instead of Roath Park Lake, Roach Park Lake. Anyway, I did learn the waggler fishing, and I suppose in a way it put me in good standing for the future, because the waggler, as you probably know, I become synonymous with the waggler in future years. Now, as I said, the lake was full of small roach, and you did need double figures, to win most of the matches. And with a tow, whenever we had a wind, you'd always get a tow. In other words, the surface of the water would go one way and underneath it would go the opposite way, and you had to overcome it. Of course, in them days we didn't have poles then, it was all rod and reel and waggler fishing. Anyway, I did learn how to slow up the float by dragging the bottom with shots on the bottom, and that won me many competitions. There was also another method. The further out you fish, the better, and this is where we use sticky maggots. Now, the way we used to stick our maggots, we used to use Horlicks. Now, Horlicks is like a malt drink, and all you do is put a sprinkle on top of the maggots, little damp them slightly, and they start to stick, and we make little balls, and obviously we're able to cast, much further out than you would by loose feeding with a catapult. Of course, to be honest, we learned this trick, this sticky maggot trick, from fishing the Gloucester Canal. The local anglers there, they kept this secret to themselves for many years. They used to be able to cast to the far side their wagglers, or straight lead sometimes, and they would loose feed over the top. And in them days on the Gloucester Canal, you could catch plenty of chub. Anyway, it took us a while, and we actually we caught on, and we brought that method back to fish Roath Park Lake. Now, although when you do feed for roach on still water, I think the key to or a winning formula was to actually catch the fish from the outskirts of the main feed and the shoal, because you're less likely to disturb a feeding shoal, so you just cast slightly to the side of where you're feeding. So it's a little tip there for you. Now, cooked hemp also became very popular and throughout the country at the time, and Roath Park Lake was no different. And with the introduction of hemp, our weights seemed to almost double overnight. Learning how to soak the hemp and seeds in sweet ingredients was the secret at the time. Although a little drop of bicarbonate would blacken them up, and they when you cooked them, and of course it would open the shells. We weren't too much interested in putting it on the hook at the time, because we'd use it as a feed. However, if you wanted to put any on the hook, you'd undercook it slightly, or some of it at least, whether you'd be able to, put it on the hook. Now, it seemed even in those early days that innovation was the key to success, and looking for that something special that gave you the advantage over other anglers. During the early days of my match fishing career, I also learned that sharing information was crucial to competing. Teaming up with friends, Clive Roberts, as I've already mentioned, Richard Candy, there was Richard Bayton, and we all helped each other when it came to tactics and information. Travelling together from match to match, we had memorable days, oh, by the way, joining our small squad was another member, Ken Hornsey, and he was known for small amounts of bait that he used to take with him, But nevertheless, he was very successful, especially on the Bristol Avon, and he managed to win a few open competitions, feeding very sparingly. Of course, in them days, we were a bit reckless sometimes, and I remember a little story. I was with Clive Roberts once, and we never had a lot of money in them days, but we managed to scrape together and got some vehicles, and Clive had an old Triumph Herald, and I remember we were going to the Bristol Avon once, and we were going through Bath, and we were driving, through Bath, and we come to a steep hill going downhill, and we got lost. And we were just about to try and stop to ask somebody the way, and all of a sudden, the car wouldn't stop. Clive was pumping the brakes, and it just wouldn't stop. So in a panic, we're travelling further, faster and faster down the hill, and I grabs hold of the handbrake and I pulls it, and I come away off the floor. Oh my God, I tell you what, it was a frightening moment. And anyway, in desperation, Clive kept crunching into the gears, and he managed to get into the first gear just before we got to the bottom to hit the roundabout. Oh, blimey, and we still made it to the draw at the end of that. Now, Richard Baton, I've got to tell you about Richie, because Richie was a class angler. And in fact, I'll talk about Richie later on, because he actually came second in the World Championships. No, bronze, and that was in years to come. But anyway, Richie, I first met Richie when I used to fish the tap as a youngster. And we used to compete against each other. You know, we'd have a couple of bob, and I think it was about 20p in our new money. Now, Richard, who was a hairdresser, he was very meticulous with his tackle. And his bait, and often I would visit him for a cup of tea, at his barber shop, and quite often, I'd see him scrutinising all his hooks and knots under a microscope, and in preparation for all occasions. I think I think it's called OTT, but he definitely had that. But as I say, Richie's record was certainly one of the best of performers of the Nomads at that particular time, especially in opens. Because of his painstaking nature to detail, probably accounted for many successes, as I said, local and nationally, and especially the big events. He actually, as I mentioned, he did actually come. He had a bronze medal in the World Championships in 1987, but as I say, more about that later. He did actually go on to win the Bristol Avon individual championship 2 years running as well. So, he was definitely a class angler. Anyway, we were all young members of this successful match fishing club, Cardiff Nomads, in the 70s and 80s. And we were winning almost every event we were going to, in the Southwest and South Wales, including the Wide Team Championships, the Lower Wide Championship, Bristol Avon Championships, South of England Championships, the Drennan Super League winners we were, and Avon Championship winners, and a few more on top of that. And it was great fun anyway, but okay, sorry about the noise in the background. Thailand's a funny old place, because they come selling you things on the door, and they use these loudspeakers on their cars. Anyway, coming back to Nomads, having a regular monthly meeting was part of our success, and the new Nomads then, we call ourselves the new, because the old guard had basically, either stopped or we'd taken over from them. Yeah, so anyway, gathering around a table every month, we would give information onto the table about tactics and knowledge, and in particular, the area of water or wherever we were going to fish the following weekend. And as I said, winning the Wide Team Championships of 12 was just one of our main achievements. Another memorable achievement was when we were all fished the Drennan Super League Series. The format was simple. Drawing out of the barrel, a team, home and away, would then fish against each other. And it was interesting, because I remember when we drew a team away in Devon in a semi-final. Now we got to a semi-final, and we went to fish this pond called Tip Top Pond. Now the home team, Newton Abbot, they boasted that they've never been beat on their home water. And anyway, we travelled down the night before, and we walked around the pond, and we noticed a small perch on the inside, in between the lilies. But there was also loads of carp and crucians, and there was bubbles everywhere. It looked like Mr. Crabtree's type of water. Anyway, uh, now the home team obviously had the advantage because they knew every peg, and they knew what tactics to use, etc. So we came up with a plan, and it was very good because every angler of our team, we decided, would throw 50 balls of ground bait in, hard and soft, right at the very beginning, because as you can imagine, it was every other peg, so we'd have Newton Abbott angler next to us on either side, and vice versa. Anyway, so just before the I got to tell you this because just before uh, the off, I just walked around the anglers to see, make sure they're all ready and prepared. And that old miser Ken Hornsey, right? He'd only had about 6 small balls. I said, "What's this, Ken?" I said, "Baby, we're supposed to be disturbing the swim. We're supposed to, disturb all the big fish from stopping feeding." Anyway, so we gathered it around, a few of us, and we got him some extra balls, and we said, "Right, make sure you bloody throw it in." Anyway, the whistle went, and as we proceeded to throw in our balls, it was like hell let loose, It was a bombardment. We were all boom, boom, boom. And there was huge ripples all around this pond, and it took minutes before it calmed down. And of course, it put off all the fish, and we proceeded to fish inside for little perch. We were on the whip, and anyway, we all won our mini sections, every one of us. It was great, It's great when a team plan comes together. Yeah, another memorable match in that series was a home draw at Roath Park Lake. Now, being home at our home water, we were unbeatable on our home water until one day heavy rain came down, and Daiwa Gordon League from Gloucester, they came down, and having won the toss for the draw of pegs, they opted for a peg that was normally not that clever. But due to the rain, there was an influx of water coming in through like a drain, and I suppose it looked a bit of a fishy area then, with fresh water coming in. So they decided to draw that peg, and anyway, well, history tells you they actually beat us because of that one peg, because the guy who drew it actually won it individually. And anyway, now the reason I mentioned this in my memoirs is because unfortunately one of the Gloucester lads, Brian McGarrett, he passed away. I was a member of their team. He passed away travelling to a fishing match once, and in an accident on the River Wye. So, as I say, rest in peace, Brian McGarrett. Anyway, during the mid to late 70s, I started to come good in my match fishing career, and with winning constantly on places like Roath Park. I even won the series, which is like a evening series, a number of occasions. And it seemed, to have all the tactics right, and everything was going great for me. We had matches on what we call the tap feeder, and I actually held the record there, 36 pound of small roach on a stick float, for a while. In addition to that, of course, I had the esteem of winning a double-headed match weekend, Saturday and a Sunday, on the River Wye at Redbrook. Whereas, winning a double-header match, over 2 consistent days, was the ambition for many of us, and I was lucky enough to do that. Fishing further afield, we travelled frequently, to the West Country, and in particular the Bristol Avon, the River Parrett, River Brew, the Kennet, and the Avon, Kennet and Avon Canal, which also reminds me of a time I just have to mention, which left me high and dry. Now, the Bristol Avon was an attraction for a few of our new Nomad members, and especially around Limpley Stoke. And on many occasions we would fish there, and there was this new float which which I suppose the local lads developed. It was a top-eyed waggler. The float was invented and adapted by a few anglers back in the 1977. It was actually, and the reason it came about is because there was an explosion of small chub on the Brislavin between Limply Stoke and Claverton. Now, as a young man, we used to fish this area, quite frequently, and the fishing was pretty good, and it was most enjoyable as well. And that summer, I remember, was no exception. It was very hot, I remember, and perhaps that was the reason the chub in the water they become hard to catch, basically. These chub become surface feeding, eating floating bait only. And by way of experimenting, we found that black floating casters was the trick. That was the way to catch them. Unfortunately, they were very hard to hit on conventional wagglers, up in the water. I believe the chub were probably feeling the resistance of the line and the float. In a split second, they shell you out, and you wouldn't make any contact to them. Anyway, to overcome this resistance of the line problem to the bait, we devised a float to combat this, and the answer was to put an eye on top of the waggler. Now, using greased line, above the float, obviously, so to the hook, so the actual line would float and the bait would float on the top. Now, a few anglers in the know were actually cleaning up using this method, and it was a very rewarding time, basically, fishing that. Now, I've tried that method on various other waters, and especially when surface feeding fish are around, it's a great little method. Probably work very well today on a lot of carp fishing waters as well, but that's something you'd have to try. But anyway, to make this float is simple. All you need to make it is simple. Just a small peacock, 4 or 5 inches long. Insert plastic eye on, obviously on the top of the peacock, and underneath you super glue a little brass or little brass rod. You can buy them from hobby shops. Super glue it in, obviously varnish it, paint it, and that's how you make those floats. In fact, I'll leave a diagram at the end of the video so you can actually see what I mean.